Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Is this on? Sounds like it's on. If I come out here and speak at this level, can you still hear me, or do I need to be behind the mic? Can't hear me back there? Okay. Then I will get behind this mic. The clock says 3 o'clock, but it's really 4 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. And let me first thank all of you, and I've been going around trying to meet some of you and most of you, and hopefully I'll have a chance to meet all of you at some point. But I want to thank you all. I know it's not easy to interrupt your day and be here, so you've taken time out. You care about this. I think everybody here cares about this. I'm just curious, is there anybody here that's against undergrounding the utility poles? One might be. Okay. Well, we have near unanimity, and that's what today's about. In addition to welcoming you and thanking you, I want to recognize my colleagues that are here. Jan Harnack, where are you? Councilmember Jan Harnack has a long history with this process. She was involved back in 2012 when we made a stab at it. Van Tanner is here as well, Councilmember. Van Tanner, I think, was also involved back then, and I think I'm not sure if I introduced myself. I'm Sabby Jonathan, newly elected council member. So you've got a good cross-section from the council right here. I think our mayor, Susan Marie, she took over at a housing commission meeting for me that I left. So when that's over, she'll join us as well. So clearly we're all interested in this. I went through the archives at the city and read as much as I could about this subject, because as many of you know, it's a subject that's near and dear to me. I've worked for many folks for a number of years trying to get this thing done. And when I ran for council, it was a campaign issue for me. So it actually was the first action that I personally took as a council member, and it met with unanimous support from the rest of the council, which was to recharge and restart this process and take a fresh look at undergrounding our utility poles. I want to read you something. Are some of you familiar with the Envision Palm Desert process that the city undertook about a year ago? I see a few hands. Yeah, it's part of the strategic plan update, which is the precursor to the general plan update. And I want to read something to you. And this actually comes from a council meeting agenda. And it goes back to September 25th, 2014. Strategic plan objective. The undergrounding of overhead utilities is consistent with the Envision Palm Desert Forward Together strategic plan's goals for land use, housing, and open space, as it will help preserve view corridors from expanding above ground utility infrastructure. Okay, why is that important? Why is that relevant? The Envision Palm Desert document that resulted from a year-long process with over 100 citizens is our guiding light now. Everything that staff does is measured against the strategic plan. And in the staff report, there's a comment about in what way what they're recommending complies with that vision. So it's a very real document. That process wasn't just let's get people together, let's have some meetings, let's talk. No. The end result was that it is our guide for where this city is moving forward in at least the next 20 years. And that statement gives us support for what I think many of us are trying to do. So let me cut to that. Most of the people here, including myself, would like to see all the above-ground utilities undergrounded for a variety of reasons. And we're going to hear from some experts and others about safety issues, aesthetics, and so forth. But I think we're all kind of on the same page there. The challenge has been and continues to be funding. I'm not going to look at a challenge and say, oh, that's really challenging, we can't do it. I'm going to look at a challenge along with you and your help and say, okay, that's the challenge. Now let's identify ways that we can overcome that challenge and make this thing happen. I see today as the start, or it's not a start of a process because the process started a few years ago, at least going back to 2012, if not before. I see this as a continuation of the process. And where I personally see the process ending, okay, is with a solution to that challenge. Let's find a way to fund this thing, and let's make it happen. That's where I think we all want to go, and that's my intent. And with your cooperation, with your help, I think we can make that happen. Today, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to finish with my welcome in about half a minute. We're going to hear a presentation from Jennifer Cusack and some of her colleagues from Southern California Edison, just to educate us about some of the issues involved with undergrounding. Then we're going to hear from staff and Marilee Colton, who spearheaded one of the most recent and current neighborhood process, which you're going to hear about. Most of you are familiar with, where a neighborhood can come together, take a 70% vote, and later a 50% plus one vote, and actually make the undergrounding happen in their neighborhood, in their district. So we're going to hear from Marilee about how it worked for her, what she did and where they're at, and her experience with that option. And it is one of several options. And then we're going to do what most of you are here for, which is listen. Listen to you, okay? When we get to that point, I'll remind you, if there's a lot of comments, I'm going to ask that we go the normal formal council routine, which is limit comments to about 3 minutes per person. If it's, if there aren't that many people that want to talk, then we'll go beyond. The point is to let everyone that wants to talk have an opportunity to be heard, and to be respectful to others, so none of us goes too long, so that others don't have an opportunity to talk and speak up. So that's the plan for today. At the end of the meeting, I'm going to ask you a question, so you can start thinking about it now. I'm going to ask you, where do you want to go from here? Okay? How do we best keep this process moving forward? Okay? So that's your homework assignment. You have an hour or so to think about that, and then we'll circle back to that. Any questions, not comments, it's not the comment section yet, but any questions before we get started? Does this sound okay? Yeah? Okay, let's do it then. Jennifer Cusack, Southern California Edison, you are up. And thank you, Jennifer, for being with us. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
So my name is Jennifer Cusack. I'm the local public affairs region manager for Southern California Edison, and with me today is Jeff Goad, our planning supervisor at the local district, and Sam Newby. He's our project manager for Rule 20 projects, which is undergrounding. So I have a brief slideshow. I'll go through that quickly. First, I'd like to thank the City of Palm Desert for having us here today. We're happy to share with you information on how to underground your utilities, and we'll do our best to answer your questions. Second, I want to make sure that I share with you that Edison is a highly regulated utility, and that will be much of what we talk about today. We are governed by the California Public Utilities Commission and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, along with other state and federal laws. As such, the rules and regulations for our operations are set forth by the Public Utilities Commission to ensure the delivery of safe and reliable service. We are in the business of providing safe and reliable and affordable electricity to all of our customers. We perform regular inspections of our system. Edison is primarily an overhead utility. The vast majority of our system is above ground, about 80%. 20% of our system is underground, which we may also maintain. Overhead systems are less costly, but once again, we do have provisions to underground them if a community decides to do so. So now that I've given you a little background information about Edison, I'm just going to go right into the Rule 20 tariff, which is the regulation that the CPUC has provided for us to underground utilities. And also note that Edison is not the only utility that uses the above-ground system. That is also Verizon and Time Warner Cable. So they would also likely be involved in an underground project. So there are 3 sections to the Rule 20 tariff. Rule 20A projects, Rule 20B, and Rule 20C projects. Rule 20A are ratepayer funded projects, and there are certain requirements for that, which we'll get into. And then Rule 20B are financed by the applicant or the community, and there's a utility subsidy. And then Rule 20C is financed primarily by the applicant and is usually an individual homeowner. So the CPUC has adopted these rules and other public utilities. So this isn't just a rule to Edison, to underground overhead utilities, primarily for aesthetic reasons. They did this with input from cities, private companies, intervener groups, and other utilities. It details the terms and conditions for undergrounding existing overhead utilities. they've provided a formula and criteria that we can use ratepayer money. And this is the whole crux of it. The Rule 20A is ratepayer money, and we cannot just spend ratepayer money how we want to. So that is why they've provided such strict guidelines. So I'll go a little bit into Rule 20A, which is the ratepayer-funded projects. There are 3 criteria: heavy concentrations of overhead electrical facilities, primarily 2 or more circuits on a major road, heavy vehicular traffic, pedestrian traffic, overhead facilities located within passes, parks, civic, recreational, scenic areas, or street roads that are identified as arterial streets, major collector roads. And they must be more than 600 feet in length. And the primary reason that most communities want to underground utilities is for aesthetic reasons. And as far as safety concerns, there are hazards associated with all sorts of our equipment, so underground and overhead. So neither one is safe. We have dig-ins, and of course there's people can also come in contact with above-ground lines. And so just a reminder, and I'm going to take this moment to remind you never to approach a down power line, and always call 811 before you dig or install a pool, any work on your property, because we do have outages and caused by dig-ins. Equipment can fail in either case. And thankfully, these incidents are rare, but both systems can be dangerous because it transmits electricity.
Question. When it says 2 circuits, heavy concentration, is that the case in Palm Desert primarily, or not at all, or is there a percentage?
No, I would say we would have to, I'm going to have Sam answer that question.
Yeah, we would have to look at the inventory maps to see what particular area. If I had to take a stab at it, I'd say the majority of the facilities in the city of Palm Desert are single, possibly some transmission lines as well as distribution lines. But off the top of my head, I couldn't really give you a percentage of how much they have that is considered multiple circuits. Do you have a better idea?
Is your question just directly about how our system is built and some of the overbuild above and below?
That's one of the qualifying criteria. Does Palm Desert qualify under that criteria?
When you talk about these undergrounding projects, it's really about what feeds the local areas that you're trying to participate in or trying to underground. So whatever circuits are existing there are the circuits that'll be affected and be undergrounded as part of the Rule 20. So the Rule 20 is to get rid of all the poles within that area of concern, and depending on how many circuits are on it, will be incorporated into the undergrounding system. It won't be just one circuit as we see it. Maybe we're not seeing the same
Well, I just wanted to make sure that we weren't knocking
Verbiage.
because we didn't have the right kinds of wires overhead. That's all.
Yeah, no, it won't make a difference.
I'm going to ask you to please, I know there's going to be a lot of questions.
And I just wanted to ask if you could speak into the microphone a little more. Some of us in the back are having a little trouble hearing Jennifer's presentation.
Okay, we will do that. And then if we can, just so we get through this part of it, and then we're going to hear from Marilee, and then we're going to open up to questions and comments. So if you can just hold them, then it won't throw the presenters kind of off track and the whole thing off track. So, okay, and that's what we'll do. When we get to the Q&A and the comment section, then David will present a microphone. And I failed to mention, we have a number of staff people here as well that will be able to address your questions that are specific to Palm Desert, including our city manager, our assistant city manager, Dave Herman, Mark Greenwood, a bunch of others. So we're going to get to all that. Thank you.
And I think also to answer your question, when an area has been identified as wanting to go underground, that's something that we can evaluate, and that's what we do in-house. So we will work with the city to do that. The biggest challenges with undergrounding, of course, are cost. It's about $1 to $2 million per mile, and that's just a rough estimate. So that's just again, cost. So there are funds that are collected through ratepayer money that are provided to the city for Rule 20A qualifying projects. And this is the current annual allocation and balance of that allocation. And that can be mortgaged up to 5 years. And this is where if the city wanted to consider a Rule 20A project, they could bring it to Edison. We would evaluate it based on this criteria. We have an internal process to do that, and then if it qualifies, then we could do a rough order of magnitude estimate, and Sam can begin the process. So this is fairly simple. If it qualifies as Rule 20A and we have enough money, then we can do it, and that's simpler. The last Palm Desert Rule 20A project was completed in 2003 on Cook Street between Fred Waring and Avenue 42 and cost approximately $1.7 million. So Rule 20B, if it does not satisfy the Rule 20A project criteria, then a community could choose to form a Rule 20B assessment area or project. And it would again have to be greater than 600 feet in length, linear feet, but the undergrounding is paid for by the applicant. And the cost of the new equipment, there is a credit though, so it's paid for by the applicant with a ratepayer funded credit for the cost of the new equivalent overhead and other systems. So you're not paying 100% of the cost. There is some credit back, but still very expensive. So it's, again, a collaborative process. This is something primarily we'll speak closer to about the project that she's doing. It's a Rule 20B project where the community comes together. Once they decide this is something they do, the city has asked us to move forward with the design phase and put up the money to do so. And then we go into the assessment phase. That's the city would do that process. And then after the funds have been paid by the city, then we can construct and underground the facilities. The previously completed Palm Desert Rule 20B project was in 2007 east of Highway 74 between Haystack and Homestead. And Rule 20C are for individual property owners, usually smaller projects, and they typically pay the full cost. There is some credit for the existing system and removal of facilities, we do that. And so this is an overhead system. So we have our primary lines, the secondary lines. This does not denote multiple circuits, even though it looks like there's a lot of wires there. This is single circuit, not congested. There's cable and television, and so this is a typical circuit that you'll see in your neighborhoods. With a transformer, all of that has to be put underground. There's multiple conduit, which are the pipes that the wires go in, the transformer, and the transformers are put into pad mount boxes. This is a typical pad mount structure that would be placed in some front yards. Typically, one of these serves about 6 customers, so there's aesthetic things you can do to paint and camouflage these, but this is part of the system. We would require easements. So the process is fairly simple. We can do it, but it comes down to cost and a willingness on the community. And once we receive formal direction from the city and the community, then we will go to work. And I guess with that, we'll take any questions you have.
Just to.
Oh, after, okay.
Start. Just to piggyback on your initial question, you were talking about multiple circuits on a pole for the Rule 20A specifically on the first slide. I wasn't paying attention because I was already like on the 4th or 5th slide, but that's just one of the qualifying pieces to do a Rule 20A process where I think he can explain it better, where it has to have multiple circuits. It's got to be a really busy pole line that has a lot of different layers to it, that has multiple circuits on it. Usually you'll see those right out of our substations, probably something like Deep Canyon, probably over there just south of 111. You'll see that pole line there. That has multiple circuits on it. That's the kind of stuff that they're talking about. Not like the one that she just showed you with a single circuit. That's typically what we do when we do neighborhood projects like Mary Lee's going to be talking to you here in a little bit. Does that help a little bit?
As I said, there'll be plenty of opportunity. We just have one more section where we're presenting And that'll come from staff and Mary Lee just to talk about the 20B process, which is underway right now in one of the neighborhoods in Palm Desert. So bear with us through that, and then we'll open up to more questions, comments. And do you remember what your homework assignment is? And talk about where we go from here. Okay? We have David Herman with us as one of the staff members here. David, some of you may know from the last time we went through this, he's our public information officer, among other things. So, other good things, David. So I'll turn it over to David Herman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Jonathan, and again to Southern California Edison for sharing that information about how the rules work in their entire service area. It's my privilege to tell you about how the process works in Palm Desert. And I think the first important thing to say is Councilmember Jonathan mentioned there's a history here. That history goes back a long ways, all the way back to 1974, 1 year after the city incorporated, when the council determined that all new development would be underground, all new utilities for new development would be undergrounded. And but the other big thing, as you've heard, is that undergrounding is expensive. And the city, frankly, does not have the resources to pay for community-wide undergrounding. And so we feel like we've got a workable solution now. You've heard about a project that's going through the process right now. We feel it's a democratic process that allows residents and business owners in neighborhoods that haven't yet paid for their utility undergrounding to go ahead and do so. And so that will